Okay, welcome to part 2 of my birth story. So if you haven't seen the first one, head back over to my last video and check it out. So at this point, I was talking about how I was getting contractions 1 minute apart. They were so incredibly painful. I honestly can't even, people describe them as period cramps, and they were way worse than period cramps, way worse. And I get pretty bad period cramps, but they were just so extreme because I was getting, because of her position, I was getting extreme pain in my lower back to the point where I could not lie on my back. Luckily, so I was lying on my side and my husband was pressing on my hip and my lower back for each contraction, and it definitely helped. I will say over time I got a bit better at handling the contractions with my breathing. I was really just trying to focus on breath control and taking deep breaths over and over again, which I do have a little bit of footage. I have actually an hour of footage of him just pressing on my back and me breathing through the contractions, which I will share at some point, I'm sure. So it was literally like this. I did nothing else except breathe through my contractions for the next hour and a half to 2 hours. And then finally, the anesthesiologist came in and gave me the epidural. I got up and I had really honestly no trouble at staying still through this. At this point, I was literally just so blessed that I was getting the epidural. Like, the only thing that kept me going for that 2 hours of time was knowing that I was getting the epidural and that I was going to get some relief. That is the only thing that I feel like kept me going. And so they gave me the epidural, honestly not painful at all. Like, there was a tiny sting, which was nothing compared to the pain I was feeling from the contractions. So I got it, and it took a little while to kick in. They had to even up my dose because I was like still feeling the pains, and I think that that's pretty common when you back labor, to still kind of feel some of the sensations of the contractions. And so they upped my dose a little bit, and then when they did that, I was completely numb. I was completely numb to the point where I wasn't even feeling the pressure that I was supposed to be feeling in order to be able to effectively push. So let me rewind a little bit. By the time they got there to give me the epidural, I had already dilated to 6. So that was pretty fast. I went from less than a 3 to a 6 in about an hour and a half to 2 hours time. Then once they gave me the epidural, within, I would say, 30 to 45 minutes, I had already dilated to a 10, which I didn't know because I was completely numb, but I could see on the screen that I was still having those consistent back-to-back contractions, and this was with no Pitocin or anything, just this is how fast I was having contractions. But luckily I wasn't able to feel it for those last periods of time because of the epidural. Now, once I had gotten to a 10, they're like, okay, let's go ahead and try to do some practice pushes. New mom here, never pushed a baby out of me. So I honestly did not know what I was doing, and I just was listening to them. They could not get me to a place, or at least I could not get to a place at that point where I was able to push her out. Like, I couldn't feel the pressure. I didn't know, like, they were saying, push from your like bum, like you're taking a poop. And I knew that that wasn't actually an effective way to push from some of the trainings and videos that I had done pre-labor. But I just couldn't figure out how to effectively push properly. So they're like, okay, let's just have you labor down for a while. And give you some more time. You are dilated to a 10, but I'm gonna lower your epidural down a tiny bit and give you some Pitocin to hopefully help you feel a little bit more of the pressure, so you know how to push and know like what it feels like to need to push. So they did that, and when they lowered the epidural down, even though they only lowered it down a tiny bit, and then they gave me Pitocin, I started to feel the contractions again, but it was like only in my right side, and I was lying on my right side. So that the epidural could kind of balance out and go more onto the right. At least that's what they told me. And it wasn't really working. I was still feeling the contraction was starting to get uncomfortable again. Not nearly as bad as it was, but my back pain was the most extreme at this point of what I was feeling. And because I got the epidural, I couldn't be walking around. I had to be on the bed. I could be on my side, but that was really all I could do. And so this went on. I labored down for, I want to say like an hour and a half. I wasn't feeling any more pressure. And at this point, the nurses came in and they were just like, okay, we're just going to push. We're just going to have you push. We're going to get this baby out of you. And I was like, okay. And at this point, I was pushing for a collective of about 2 hours. I still was not feeling this pressure that I was supposed to be feeling. And so I really just felt like I was pushing, but like I didn't feel like I needed to push. And we took tons of breaks within this period of time. I wouldn't push for like too long periods of time before I would pause and take a break. And just, I was absolutely exhausted at this point. So when I started pushing, I would say it was about 3 a.m., a little bit before 3 a.m. In the morning. So at this point, it was already April 4th. And I didn't even know what time it was until afterwards. But when I was pushing, I just, no matter what position I would try to push in, I tried on my knees, I tried, the typical on your back. They brought out the kind of like the is that what they're called? The stirs, where you put your feet on there and you push. They brought out this bar where I would hold on to it and push, and nothing was working. Yes, she moved down a bit. They could see the head, but she just was not coming out. And I was getting really worried at this point that I was gonna have to get a C-section. No one said anything about that, but it was in my mind. And I'm just like, I literally can't do it. Like, she's not coming out. I'm pushing as hard as I possibly can, and she will not come out. And so finally, one of the nurses came up with this idea to get this pole that goes over the bed, essentially. And they helped me get up into yogi pose, frog squat, which is really like this. And I was holding on to the bar and I was pushing. And that is the position that made baby girl's head come out. Her head was fully out when I was in this position, and then I transitioned back onto my back for the last and final push for her whole body to come out, which is just crazy because out of all of the labor videos I've seen, I've never seen someone labor in that position. And it's also really funny because I'm a certified yoga teacher and I did yogi squats so much throughout my pregnancy. And with the pain, like I was not thinking at all. So I was just going with what the nurses told me to do. But I'm so glad they came up with this because they were truly like, that baby was not coming out any other way except for in that posture. So she came out. Unfortunately, at first she was having a hard time like breathing and taking breaths because she had swallowed some meconium. So I didn't get to do an hour of an uninterrupted skin to skin. They had to take her after literally like a minute and a half because they needed to put a tube down and clear out the fluid from her lungs, which understandably I wanted them to do whatever they needed to do so that she was good to go. And she just wasn't crying for a while. I think it was like literally like 5 minutes or less, but it felt so long and I was so worried. I was like crying, and I just wanted to make sure that she was okay. And she's perfectly healthy. And I will finish part 3 after this.